I guess my art practice is mixed media. I do a lot of work that's based on concepts or ideas or something that I want to express through a visual explanation, I guess.
Mine is also mixed media. I like to use a lot of items that I would see that are like destined for the dump, and I'll try and reuse them into different types of artwork.
I would also say that my work is multimedia. So again, very much like Mark, it's just a matter of trying to take something that's been disposed and actually worthless and trying to give it a new life as something that's, you know, timeless and valuable now, which is art.
I don't think my work necessarily stemmed from sustainability, but it's a lot about discovering what is that relationship between, you know, human forms and environmental, organic, natural forms. So I really find that so interesting, that intersection of how we see ourselves within our environment and how we, you know, want to control and order and preserve and manage our environment around us, even though it's wild and natural and, you know, needs to be almost left alone in a way. So yeah, it's really interesting to kind of think about what our place is in our environment.
My artwork originally was pop art, and it was we always either just had it was just painting, but it did stem more into mixed media and recycled art once we did try and do something a little bit different. But once we did do that, how it became more about recycled art rather than painting was the amount of people then would know that I could recycle stuff to make it into artwork, and then they would just be bringing me items. So then it got to the point where I would either have to be given the decision to either throw them away in the dump myself, or be able to create something with them. So our artwork is more on the sustainable side, knowing that these people didn't want to throw away the items and they gave it to us, and so we're trying to battle through what we've got now to make it into artwork.
I grew up in a family where we were always kind of sustainability minded, and so like for example, my grandfather still has stuff like old paint cans and stuff from like the 80s. He just hated to throw anything away, so I've always had that. And I kind of like lost sight of it, you know, being in this world full of consumerism and everything. But I think where it really took a turning point going back towards the sustainability focus was me having my own kids and then realizing now that I'm supposed to be a steward. What am I going to leave behind for them? And I decided that I wanted to use my voice or my artwork as a voice in order to bring some light to these issues.
I think we might all be a little bit of hoarders.
Yeah, a hoarder support group here.
You know, collecting objects that like are really fascinating or interesting and just like keeping it covered. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but this is really cool. So, and I think maybe these two are
I'm the same way. So I'll come up with an idea or a concept of what I want to do. I'll use what I have in place, but I always find that falls short on completing the whole art piece from what I've got, you know, just to make sure it works. So then I actually source a lot of my materials from the thrift shops. The idea is that they've been given the same somewhat burden of either keeping it or throwing it away. And obviously with the money that they do make from selling these materials, then it obviously then goes into a charity. So obviously each individual thrift shop has their own charity, but I like to use the thrift shops just to complete the body of work from after using what I have.
I have a similar problem as Mark does, you know, like everyone recognizes us as, you know, the guys that can make stuff out of art, out of trash. And so they drop it off to us like, here, like I can't use it, you probably can. So a lot of times I'm trying to reconnect them with the right people. And most of my materials almost exclusively come from the beaches. So everything that I find on the beaches I tend to want to use for art. And if I can't use it, I pass it on to another artist. Sometimes it's just once a week. Sometimes, some weeks I manage to get there every single day. Just depends on what my schedule is.
So I actually have it where the Humane Society, I pick up normally on a Tuesday or Wednesday, that's the store that has all the clothes and all the toys and the materials. The book loft actually keeps me all this stuff, and I have to pick that up on a Friday. And the NCBO, it depends if it's a Monday or a Friday, depends on if they had it ready from the week before. I feel like I've become more of a hoarder.
It's a problem, right?
My wife actually, during lockdown, made me watch a hoarding episode. We're not that bad. We don't have all the studios bad, but my house isn't overrun by boxes and bags of trash. We've since bought organisers. So right now it looks more like a person that has compulsive disorders. You know, turn the lights on, and I have everything in box, like color coded and sorted, and so I would say I'm more of it's changed me. I wasn't so organized before. But in that case, I actually find a lot of my free time now. I shred magazines, watching TV, so I can make a pile of all my different colours to go into my organisation boxes, so then if an artwork does come up, I don't actually have to spend months trying to find the material. It's already sitting there ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important too, to have kind of that material once you found a rhythm or some kind of style, just to have that material on hand, so whenever you find a spare moment, you can pick up the plastic bags and start weaving them through, or pick up your needle and thread and start producing something whenever you have a chance.
Yeah.
So,
I find as well that by going into a sorting mode, before when I did find really cool items, and I don't know if it's the same with you guys, but I would put them in boxes and think, alright, well I'm going to come back to that one. And then obviously it just sits in a drawer or it sits in a room somewhere. Yep. And then it gets to the point where I've been dying for it, I've been looking for it, can't find it, and then once I get to a couple of years later, I open this one box and there was the one item that I would have been really looking for. So to me, organisation has become a huge part of what I have to do, purely on the fact that I feel like if I don't organise it, I do feel more of a hoarder by just stuffing it in boxes and then keeping it in the house.
Yeah. And I tend to actually box things together based on the project that I plan to work on, whether it's going to be 6 months from now, 2 years from now, whenever, so have these ideas. I've kind of got away from keeping a journal per se, but just packing things away cohesively, like, okay, well, I know this will be one project, this will be another project, this will be another one. And from time to time, you have to Frankenstein it a bit, just like, okay, I'm going to combine these two boxes together, so for the most part, organization.
I've addressed the coral bleaching in the way that we value our coastlines. I've also addressed the way that we consume our natural environment, so we've used interesting materials like dental floss and sea bands to kind of talking about that, consumption of our environment. But yeah, there's lots of ways. I think visual arts is so important because it's so hard to explain some of the changes that are happening in our world that are emotionally draining and sometimes, really shocking to, grow up here and see all the differences. So to be able to express that in a visual way seems to give it more impact or more kind of, whatever's hard to explain, like how I'm having trouble getting the words out right now. Yeah. Sometimes it's a lot more powerful in an image.
And brings me back to a quote by Carl Safina, who's a renowned ecologist. He actually said that, science does a really good job of telling us exactly what the world is, but not necessarily what to feel about it or to think about it. And he says that's the job of the arts, more specifically the visual arts. So, very true.
Yeah.
I find with mine, especially when I did the show Consumed, was that I wanted to use material that people would have, like everyday material. If people work in the office, they would see a lot of stamps. If they, for me to keep my energy up, I drink a lot of Coca-Cola. The items that were obviously littered all over the beaches. When I met with Tortuga regarding their artwork, they said to me that they were horrified that their yellow bags were always scattered all over the beaches. Now everybody would go to Tortuga, get their little beer, put it in a yellow bag, sit on the beach, enjoy themselves, enjoy the beach, and then sadly leave the trash behind. And it was one of the sore points for this company, knowing that their plastic bags were littered up and down the Cayman beaches, so they wanted to use it in their artwork. But the idea was, this is everyday items that we do discard and we do throw away. I've obviously kept them for a reason for this artwork. I'm not saying everybody has to hoard them away and not throw them out, but
Just call Mark.
yeah, it's more on the fact that we need to come up. It was to try and highlight the whole, recycling idea. This is stuff that we throw away and we don't even think twice about. But then we don't even think about taking it to recycling plants or recycling bins, or even having it where rather than just having one bin in your house, you have 3 different ones, knowing, okay, this one's paper, this one's cardboard, this one's metal, this one's glass, and then other waste. There should be some sort of separation.
Yeah, and all of our work, I think, really makes people stop and think about, like, oh wow, this is the amount that I could use in a day, or this is like something that I can contemplate as a reminder.
I think as well, I think people do take someone away with it, knowing that, okay, someone has been very creative and did something with these items, which I'm hoping that a lot after the fact, like even now I get a lot of people contacting me saying, okay, I've been saving stamps for the last 2 or 3 weeks and I've got like 100 stamps. And I was like, wow, okay, normally obviously that would get thrown away. Now stamps are very small, it's paper, it would be able to get biodegrade. But then if you think about sweeter wrappers or Coca-Cola cans or all the rest of stuff like that, it's just a small part. But if you can get people moving and thinking in different directions to think, all right, well, I can do better, then I think that's the way forward.
I think that a lot of the issues that we actually tackle in our work is very multifaceted. Like, we're presenting one argument for it or against it in some cases, but there's so many other ways that we could actually look at it and different ways that we can address it with our artwork. And like I said, now I think we're all addressing it in some way or the other, but I mean, it's such a large problem. I think if we continue pitching in against this problem or these problems over the years, I think you'll find that we're still just barely scratching the surface.
I love them all equally. I think I've really enjoyed making things that take a lot of time, especially recently during the pandemic when there's like a lot more fear out there and worry. You just the idea of like that, and you get into the flow, the tempo of it, where you can just like.
It's very cathartic, and it's like
I'm the polar opposite.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I know. So I get more methodical and plan every step of the way. And the whole idea is then so I don't miss something and I don't forget it, or it has to come out, it has to look a certain way. But I enjoy it once it's fully finished and sitting on the wall. I could like having it, building it. I push myself to do it because I know I'm going to enjoy the feeling that once it's fully done and people can enjoy it. But making it to me is it's very frustrating. But it's not. It's the feeling of knowing that it's going to once it's done, then it's going to look a certain way or it's going to be a certain way, and I already can see it in my head of what it is, and I have to methodically do the time to do it. Especially in lockdown, I have a little girl. Me and my wife would do a time frame of who would get certain hours and when you were allowed to have them or when you were able to take like the time off, and then once it was your turn, then we had to play with my little girl or do educational things or read books with her and stuff like that. So when we were in lockdown, when I had my time, I knew that if I didn't put in a couple of hours, I wouldn't be done. So it was more, I was like kind of almost forcing myself, okay, I know it's going to take another 10 hours to get this one done. If I get 2 hours here and 2 hours over there and get that all done, it'll be finished, I put it on the wall, I'll enjoy it then. But it's not, well, they say it's a labour of love. For me, I'm looking forward to the end. And that's what pushes me to get it done. I don't want to have to sit there and it's half done and I just see it on the wall for so long. And to me, I want to see it fully finished. And especially when we had the opening here and everything was finished and a lot of people were enjoying it. To me, that was the ultimate feeling of, okay, this is why I did it. This is why I've spent so much time in doing it. But then again, my process as well is I would sit in front of the TV and cut out, I'd say close to 1,000, 2,000 Muppets characters. You know what I mean? I don't know if anybody would turn around and say that's fun.
Some Mila might find it fun.
Yeah.
So which one's your favorite?
It's my favorite's always been Better Half. It's a portrait of my wife made out of Coca-Cola cans. It's the first one I've done. So it was, I want to say it was kind of stepping stones off wanting to move forward, because I obviously enjoyed that one the most.
And I'd like to think that my favorite piece isn't created yet. I think it's yet to come. Like I don't get terribly attached to my work. Obviously I'm passionate about the stuff that I'm creating here now, but I don't think that I feel a certain attachment, or I wouldn't favor it more than another piece that I've done. So I think it's yet to come.
I'm working on a series of plastic lids and woven beadwork. So it's like haute couture beadwork on top of like guacamole lids. And I really like the juxtaposition between something that, you just take off your guacamole, throw in the trash, just one use out the window, and then the embroidery that people spend so long and spend so much money on, and it's just like this time-consuming thing. So it's that juxtaposition between the time and the value and the discarding of the objects. I think it's a really cool project. I've done 6 of them since March. So it's growing and very therapeutic to make. I love watching TV and just kind of like going through and making them.
Yeah, definitely. So normally I do a lot of artwork that hangs on walls, but I was approached and asked to build a sculpture, and I was talking with the person that commissioned the sculpture, and they were telling me that they didn't want just the regular, a big slab of concrete, and they didn't want like some stone thing or anything like that. They wanted something different. They wanted to be able to do something really crazy. It was also over a lot of tequila, and I kind of pitched them an idea which I didn't know if it would work, but the whole idea was it was something out there, and I thought it would work. And basically it's a topiary sculpture of a parrot. I've never done topiary before. My wife constantly tells me, she said, "Oh, have you done topiary?" No. And she said, "Oh, okay, so you couldn't have just started with a 2-foot or a 3-foot one. No, you had to go build a 16-foot tall parrot made out of topiary is trees." So I built a steel sculpture, a steel structure, and then we're building all the plants in the inside to then grow out. And then the way the structure is made is that from about a foot away from the structure, you cut the plants, and it should make the head off of the parrot. So we're actually just a couple of days away from finalising that.
Completely finishing it?
Well, the plants are going in now, the beaks get installed on the weekend, and the eyes are in, and that's it done.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I'm excited on that one. I pulled the steel out of the dump. Me and Kerwin are no longer allowed there for safety reasons. We would just drive in there, we would know where stuff is, and we would just pick whatever we thought we needed, necessary, to take and use on our artworks.
Yep.
So
I want to go on the record to say that Kaitlyn had no part in this. Completely absolved.
So no, the idea was that I wanted to, it was to be sustainable. The idea was to build a living sculpture. I didn't have steel. It's very expensive. I didn't think that I didn't know kind of what I was going to use to start with. I didn't know which would be the best. We went into the dump, sure enough, not been in there for more than 5 or 10 minutes, I found all the different pieces that I needed, exactly how I kind of imagined it in my head. I had never welded before. I think I'm pretty good at welding now. But the whole idea was I wanted to use items that obviously were they were in the dump, but there was no use for them there. But now there's this this beautiful parrot head. The wood was all made from pack. It's like almost when a lot of the bigger items when they're shipped out, it's not 2x4s, but it's so that you can get the metal bounds around it and everything like that, like pipes and crates and everything like that. So we had a lot of that. My day job is chemical electrical supply, so we have an abundance of this wood. So we used that. It was almost the same kind of colour as a beak. We kind of put a little bit of grey into it to make it work, but it all came together very nicely. Where we still had to buy some materials to make sure that the structure was all there, but the idea was that we ended up using warehouse shelvings. And I don't know if you know anything about them, but they have little holes in them so that you can slot the shelves in, which works perfect for when I need to. We're making a custom plant pot, whereas when they ship the palm trees, it's this black netting that goes on the bottom of the palm trees. So with those holes, we can actually zip tie and connect the black netting, and then we fill it with dirt, and then we cut holes in the netting to be able to put the plants in the side for it to grow out. So it worked out very well.
I've been doing a bunch of mosaics. There's a few that were in progress before I actually did my last show that didn't make it to the show. It wasn't my intention that they would have made it to the show or anything anyhow, but I'm constantly working towards that. And the last piece that I had completed for the show was a life-size white-tip shark. So it's 7 foot long, not quite the size of Marc's topiary there, but it was certainly the largest sculpture that I had actually completed up until that point. So I found that it worked a lot quicker than actually sitting there going down 1/4-inch tiles one at a time. But I decided that I wanted to do some more sculptures, so I got a couple of those in the works. So.
Don't be afraid to fail. Just pick up the materials and go for it. You're always going to discover new ways of putting things together and building things and creating things, so you just have to try.
I'll echo that as well. I mean, going back to what Marc was saying there, like, okay, well, he'd never done a topiary before, but, there must be some way of figuring it out. Much like when I was doing like these plastic mosaics, it's like, I wanted the challenge. Like, okay, well, if I'm painting something, I can always look on YouTube or I can look it up. It's probably been tried before. But anybody working in a plastic mosaic, and like nobody's done that, like we need to figure out processes. And I think all of us are like quite innovative in the fact that we've actually like stuck with it and figured it out. We just found our niche. So don't be afraid to fail. Just jump out there, figure things out.
I've got a pretty important one, especially if it's recycled. We learned this with we made a very large portrait of Jimi Hendrix out of plastic bottle caps. And we realized that be very cautious of the size that you are making it. If you do a large recycled art piece, make sure that it does have a forever home. If you build something smaller that can go on walls, it works a lot better. But if you go for the larger artworks, sadly there is a good chance that it could get destroyed and obviously then turn back into trash. A good example, Carlo made the elephant Nelly out of trash, and it was on the side of the road. It was a large installation. The whole idea would be that it was to go into a show where it would be inside a room, be the elephant in the room, but it would be so big that you'd have to somewhat crawl around it to get out. It was a great concept, great idea. Sadly, it then got demolished and turned back into trash, and sadly it's stayed that way. So I would say be very cautious on your size. If you do go for a large piece, you have to confirm or have to make sure that it's got forever home.